Hello class and welcome to another exciting facilitation for this semester. I am Dr. Annie George, Department of Public Health, Faculty of Health Sciences, and will be your guide. Hope we all enjoy it. Thank you.
So welcome to week 7, topic 7 on applied epidemiology, PHS 511. We'll be looking at definition and concepts of communicable diseases, the second part of it. So at the end of this lesson, we should know how to understand further concepts and terminologies that are used in the study of communicable diseases epidemiology, and also know how to use these terminologies and apply them in applied epidemiology of communicable diseases. So we will start with incubation period in the use of these terminologies. What is incubation period? Incubation period of any disease is usually the time interval between the initial contact with the infectious agent, when the infectious agent gets into the body, and when it begins to manifest its first sign and symptoms of the disease. That period between the entry and manifestation of the signs and symptoms of disease is called the incubation period of that disease agent, and it varies. It varies among the disease agents, whether it is a virus, infection with viruses, infection with bacteria, infection with any other organism, which is a communicable disease. Incubation periods vary. So, incidence rate is one of the rates or morbidity rates used in study of epidemiology. Incidence rate is usually new cases of a disease within a population. You can also say it is new cases over the total population that are involved, where those cases are found, and is usually expressed per 1,000 or 100,000 in a year. So prevalence, that's another morbidity rate. The two major morbidity rates in epidemiology are the incidence rate and the prevalence rate. So prevalence rate, while incidence rate is number of new cases, prevalence is number of new and old cases of a disease within a population. That's what prevalence rate is. And it's also expressed as new and old cases of a disease over the total population that is involved, where those cases were found. Is usually per 1,000 or so, or 100,000 in a year. Now there's what we call point prevalence, when it is at a specified time. Those old and new cases at that specific time is called point prevalence. But if it is over a period of time, it is called period prevalence. That is new and old cases over a period of time. That is what prevalence rate is. Now, in the next slide, we will have an activity. Activity 1, still in our understanding of concepts used in communicable disease epidemiology. Who is a host? So a host is an organism which includes man. It can be an animal as well, that is capable of being infected by the infectious agent. Capable of being infected by the infectious agent. And the host can be definitive or primary host. That's a host where the infectious agent undergoes its sexual stage and attains maturity. That's a definitive or primary host. Then we can have a secondary host as well, when such infectious agent undergoes its asexual stage of its cycle. That is a secondary host. So definitive or primary host is where it attains its sexual stage, while the secondary host is where it undergoes or attains its asexual stage of maturity. So case is another terminology used. Who is a case? Or what is a case? A case is an infected or diseased person or animal with confirmed laboratory tests showing clinical signs and symptoms. Now, a case can also be a confirmed case. We'll still go further to describe cases. When a case is a confirmed case, it means that that infected person or animal has a confirmed laboratory test, whether he's exhibiting clinical symptoms or signs. Like somebody who tests positive to COVID is a confirmed case, even though he may not be showing signs and symptoms of COVID. That's a confirmed case. So who is a suspected case? We've talked about confirmed case. So when is someone said to be a suspected case? When someone is showing signs and symptoms of a disease, but there hasn't been laboratory test result to confirm it, especially if the person is within the incubation period of that disease, but there hasn't been laboratory tests signifying confirmation that this person is either positive or negative, or positive in this case. That person is a suspected case. So a suspected case shows signs and symptoms of a disease and must have had contact with a confirmed case, even though there hasn't been laboratory confirmation. But the person is showing signs and symptoms and has had contact with a confirmed case. Like having contact with someone who has COVID, but you're not showing signs, or you are showing signs and symptoms and you have had contact with somebody. Or you are showing signs and symptoms and you have also had contact with a probable case. We will also explain what a probable case is. So you are a suspected case when you're showing signs and symptoms and you have had contact with a confirmed case, or you have had contact with a probable case. In that situation, there hasn't been any laboratory test result to show that you're positive. And this is happening within the incubation period of the disease. You become a suspected case. So what then is a probable case? A probable case is when such test result is indeterminate, is neither positive or negative. Then someone who has died, from area where there is high prevalence of such infection and whose sample was not taken before the person's death. So such person is a probable case. We will have another activity in the next slide. Activity 2. What is epidemic? So you can see how we are talking about concepts and terminologies that are used in communicable diseases epidemiology. So now we are in epidemic. What is an epidemic? So epidemic is the occurrence of same cases in a population of particular geographic area at a specific time in excess, mark the word, in excess of the usual incidence of the disease. So you have cases coming in excess of what it used to be in a particular geographic area at a specific time. That becomes an epidemic. An epidemic can be point epidemic when such outcome or such outbreak happen to people who probably of same origin of infection. Example, water supply. Infection resulting from water supply in an area. Everybody drinks from the same source of water, or everybody having diarrhea or stomach infection after eating from the same food and the same source. That is point source epidemic or common source epidemic. However, in propagated epidemics, usually from person to person spread, is not from the same source. Maybe the same food everybody ate or from the same water everybody drank. In propagated, it is being transmitted from person to person, like in transmission of COVID or measles. Those are examples of propagated epidemics. So, what is pandemic? Another term that is used in communicable disease epidemiology. Pandemic is simply a bigger epidemic when it occurs in a wider population, like different countries of the world at specific time, in excess of the usual incidence of the disease. Just like we have COVID. COVID is everywhere in the world. So when you have greater people or greater, geographical spread of an infection, not a localized like epidemics, when it involves a large population of people across borders, across boundaries, it becomes pandemic. It's a global thing. Now, another term we use in epidemiology is quarantine. When you use the term quarantine, some people confuse it. Some people use quarantine and interchangeably use isolation, but most people don't even know what they mean. So when you quarantine someone, it means restriction of movement of people exposed or that have come in contact with a confirmed case of a disease through the incubation period. The essence of that is to prevent transmission. So you restrict movement of people who have been exposed. It doesn't mean that they are positive. They are not confirmed yet. So you want to restrict their movement within the incubation period to further find out if they would test positive or negative. So at the time you're confining them, they don't have signs and symptoms. They are suspected cases that you need to find out within the incubation period if they test positive or negative. So those people are the people you quarantine within the incubation period of a disease. But when you're isolating someone, you're confining the person and treating the person because the person is now a confirmed case of a disease to also prevent transmission as well. So you isolate cases and you quarantine suspects. These are the terms and how we use them in applied epidemiology. So, what are the examples of communicable diseases? Communicable disease, you have the protozoal communicable disease like malaria is an example. You have the viruses like COVID, Lassa fever, yellow fever, HIV/AIDS. And then you have bacteria like cholera, cerebrospinal meningitis, typhoid fever, leprosy, tuberculosis. Then you have the helminths like the guinea worm, schistosomiasis, filariasis, and onchocerciasis. These are a few examples of communicable diseases. In summary, we've learned terminologies like prevalence, incidence rates in epidemiology of communicable diseases. We've also seen how to use and apply these terms like epidemics, pandemic, incubation period, host, and cases in communicable disease epidemiology. So in our next lecture, we shall be looking at general principles of how to control communicable diseases. Thank you for listening.